Okay, welcome back to coding, and we're going to add a little bit to the page we finished with in the last video. So I've got my file here, and I'm going to preview it here in a second. We can see what it looks like. There it is. Got our text. Notice when we resize the window, the text reflows to fit the window. So we want to get a little more control over the structure and layout of this page and keep our text more legible. Notice if it gets really wide, we get lines that are hard to read because they go all the way across the screen. So we want to limit the width of our text in some way. We're going to insert a div. Again, a div is just a box. We're going to give it an ID, which is a way to name it, and we can call it, I'm going to call it wrapper. Some people use the word container. It's just a made-up word. It doesn't mean anything intrinsically. So wrapper, container, whatever you're comfortable with. I need to close that with my greater than or right angle bracket, and then it's going to automatically insert that end div tag in for me. And I want this div to wrap around everything that's on the page. That's why it's called a wrapper. So I'm going to cut it, Command X, and put it all the way at the bottom right before my end body tag. Notice right now my end body and HTML tags are red. That means the browser thinks there's something wrong, or not the browser, but brackets. And what it thinks is wrong is I've got a div tag that doesn't have an ending. And now it does. Okay. If I just insert a div tag, now I've got two div tags that don't have ending, so then after that it's still showing body and HTML in red because it realized that I have unclosed tags. So I put the slash in. You have to be careful when you do that because sometimes the brackets decides to type stuff for you that you don't really want. If that happens, just get rid of it. And so that hasn't changed anything about the look of our page. Still the same, still has the same behavior. But now we can apply some styling to this new box we've entered into our page structure. To do that, we're going to go into the style sheet. Remember, the styles should all be, for now, in the head of the document between these style and end style tags. And because I gave this box an ID, when I refer to it in the style sheet, I start with a hashtag or a number sign. It's the shift of the 3 key on your keyboard. Then without a space or anything, then I type the word that I used, in this case wrapper. If you use container, type container, hashtag container. Then my curly braces. So those go after the thing that I want to style. And then I start listing my properties and their values. So if I want to get some control over the width of the text on the page, since everything's inside of the wrapper, I'm going to use the width property in my wrapper, and I can set it to in a number of ways, but I'm going to start just with pixels. So 500 px, don't put a space after the 500. And now if I look at it, it's made that box 500 pixels wide. It won't resize now because it's going to stay 500. Even if I go smaller, it'll cut text off. It doesn't reflow in the window because I've given it a fixed size. Another way to do that is to specify a percentage. If I well, just try this. I'll make it really wide just so you can see what happens. If I set it at 2000, it's going to go really big. And now it's getting cut off because my screen is not 2000 pixels wide. Okay. So another way to do it is to put in a percentage. And it's a percentage of its container, the thing it's inside of. And if I look at my code, I can see the wrapper basically is inside of the body. And the body is the current width of the browser window. So that size is changing as I resize the window. So if I make it a percentage, say 80%, it will be 80% of the current width of the window. I resize the window, it's going to resize as well. So now it doesn't go all the way across, it's always going to take up 80% of the current width of the window. So that's giving me a little more control over my spacing. So I've got some space on the right now. And so I'll give it another property called margin. Margin is the space around something, to the left, right, above, and below. I'm going to make the margin for now auto, and we'll see what that does. Notice I didn't put a space after the colon. It's not picky about that for some reason. Some things it's picky about, some things it isn't. So it doesn't matter whether I put one in there or not. And it turns out in this case, auto is going to center my wrapper. So it's got the same amount of space on the left and the right. So when I resize the window, I get some nice space on the sides. So I get something that looks a little more like a book page, right? We don't run text in a book right to the edge of the paper. And it still reflows. It can still get pretty wide, so I might want to put a limit on, and I can. I can use another property called max width, max-width. And I set this to some number that is the widest I want, remember, the wrapper to get, not the window. I can't control the window, but the wrapper. So now it will never get more than 900 pixels wide. If I make the window bigger, it stays within that constraint. If I make it smaller, it reflows again because I'm just said the maximum width is 900. And again, I just get something that's more legible, but I've limited the maximum line length that I can get. To make it easier to see my wrapper while I'm working, I might want to give it some color just so I can see it on the page. So I can set the background color to something, and so I put background hyphen color, and I just pick a color. I'm doing this just so I can see where it is. I'm not trying to worry about what it looks like really. I just want to see where that wrapper is. Notice there's also a little space at the top, and we'll deal with that later. That's actually coming from my H1. It's inside of the wrapper, so in theory it shouldn't do that, but it does. Okay. But this, again, just a way to, as I'm building things, it helps to be able to see where the boxes are, especially as our styles get more complicated. So I've still got the even space on the right and the left, and all the limits and things are still working. So if I'm happy with the structure once I've got it, then I want to get rid of that color, so I just go back and just delete that line, and it goes away. And that's why you're working. Some things will apply instantly to your page. You don't even have to save it. If you things like text and stuff, you probably will have to save. So I want to, at this point, save as, so that I can save a new version. If I just do save, it saves over the old one, and I'm going to call it V3, just so keep track of my versions. And I'm going to start putting everything in its own folder. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'll call it Kafka something, Kafka Web. And I'm doing that because ultimately we want everything that goes into a web page or site in the same folder. So eventually we'll be adding some pictures to this, and we'll be separating out our own style sheet. So all that stuff is going to go into that folder. All right, so this is getting closer to starting to get some structure to it. We're going to add one more thing to this, and then that'll be kind of it for this stage of the project. So what I really want to see is everybody get to this point by Monday. So you've got a file that we can really start turning into something that looks more like a web site and web page. So we're going to add something called a header, and a header is just it's another box. It's going to go at the top of the page, hence header, and we're going to put the title, the author, and the translated by inside of the header. And so I paste in that end header tag. I cut and paste it, copy and paste, or no, cut and paste it, and it helps to get things lined up. So I'm going to do a little lining up here. Remember the spaces and returns in here, like the one after the H2 and before the H3, will be ignored. But I'm just going to tab this over so visually I can look at it and see that those three headings are inside of this box called the header. I'll move my wrapper over. I could indent everything inside of the wrapper, but that's basically everything on the page, so I don't really need to do that. But sometimes it helps to keep things lined up on your page. And even your style sheet, if you keep it organized and indent things, and if sometimes brackets does indenting you don't want, you have to get rid of it, but other than that. So again, I want to make sure, made changes, you save it, and then I will put the assignment stuff on D2L, but basically this is what we want. We want this file saved in a folder, and it should look exactly like this. And again, remember, after the paragraph tags, that space is going to be ignored. If there's space in the final view, as there is, it's coming in from the paragraph tags, not from the returns that you actually see on the screen. And that's it.